Very good to see you, man.
Sí, damas y caballeros. ¿Estamos listos? We are ready.
Welcome everybody to LULAC 25, a solidarity rally.
I'm glad to see you're still kicking.
Yeah, welcome. Likewise.
So my name is Andrew Sandoval. I'm the Vice President of our local LULAC Salinas Chapter 2055, and I'd like to welcome all of you. We understand that many in our community are grieving, along with Minneapolis and the rest of the nation. A lot of what has happened nationally has happened locally within our community involving overzealous policing. I want to preface that not all police officers are bad. Those that we see in the news doing bad things usually outweigh the number of times we see them doing good. Just like the protesters, we can't assume all protesters are bad, so we can't assume all police are bad. The benefit of the doubt we give to one must be given to the other. Sometimes well-meaning people are surrounded by those that mean to do harm and do not have the community's best interests at heart. So we come together today to grieve, to mourn, to share, and to do it in a peaceful way so that our actions do not overshadow our words. We plan to be mindful of your time, so we've kept the agenda down to an hour. Today, you'll hear from city leaders, the chief of police, community poet, and activists, and mothers who are raising children of color, struggling to help them navigate a sometimes oppressive system. Sometimes it's hard to see the beauty in a concrete jungle, and that's how it is on the east side. There are so many talented young artists who are using their words to share their version of history. These artists have learned that words can heal a community and bring people together. Our first award-winning poet, born and raised in the east side of Salinas, has won numerous awards and was invited to the state capitol to share her poetry. She serves as a shining example that there is more to Salinas than gang violence and produce. So it's my honor to present my friend, Kenya Burton.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you guys for being here. I know we all need to be here as people who are African American feeling these struggles right now and our allies, because sometimes, to be brutally honest, it doesn't feel like they believe us until we have a spokesperson. So I thank you guys for being here. Help me. I can't breathe. He's going to kill me. Trigger finger counterfeit bill, telling the officer he can't breathe 15 times, one time too many, taking another black man's life. 8 at night, 8 minutes of pleading, a 2-minute video, one body to be buried, a cop with hands in his pockets and a smirk on his lips, pointing like Columbus finding land that did not belong to him, and you still proclaim his innocence. You will move on to the next story while we scrape our men off of the streets. You let a guilty man go while we pick out a casket. You give him bodyguards to protect him while we choose his pallbearers. We are being gunned down like dogs, and they still have the audacity to say that racism doesn't exist. Say that the system wasn't built from the bodies of our sisters and brothers. Say I'm angry. Say I'm vicious. Say that I am an animal, so it makes it okay to kill me. They use our deaths to teach us lessons. Don't talk too loud. Don't fight back. Hope that they get off of you before you take your last breath. You have a bulletproof vest and still our phones prove no protection. We could catch our murder live and you would still call it fabricated. Understand that your story will never be just yours. your movement will become theirs. Turn our Black Lives Matter into All Lives Matter, because when the topic is not on them, they feel shadowed. You can't be the main protagonist without a white companion. If you hate this country so much, why stay in it? Take this knee and call it unpatriotic, call it scum. Tell me to go back to my country when this country is more mine than yours. Kaepernick got blacklisted and the cop gets repositioned. Takes a manhunt to bring suspect in. Only did something when we saw the footage. We can have a group of Nazis walk down these streets and receive no punishment, but fight for the lives of black people and let the squads in. You want this skin, but not this condition. You want the show, but not the credits. You want my mouth, but won't take this medicine. In your vocabulary, injustice is called compromise. Injustice is just special treatment. One voice and make it 3/5 of a person, because it's easier if you can make a black person less than a man. And they wonder why we still rise in numbers. We are only seen as people when we are in groups. You hunted us down for centuries. You beat us, you lynched, you raped our women and children, and we asked for equality and they gave us bondage. Accepting these conditions or fall victim, we want to live, but you want to finish what your ancestors started. You killed someone's son, you killed someone's daughter. You tell us to get over it after you wash the blood off. Paint over our memorials. Make us watch as you try to erase us. Word of advice. Show them that the inside of your palms are the same color as their skin. Don't do anything that will make them want to come in. They will cut you open to see if you bleed the melanin you are so proud of. My mother told me from a very young age that if you must respect authorities, never speak too loud. If a cop stops you, don't do anything to scare him. Look down and stay quiet. Do anything you can to make it home. Don't make a mother bury her child. Apologize for my flesh. Sorry that her loving a black man gave me a death sentence. Be good and get home safe. One of my worst fears is bringing a beautiful black boy into this world. That I will have to fill his bedtime stories with warnings and package his lunchbox with silence and submission. I will have to raise two different people, his blackness and his image. That he will turn on the TV years from now and say, why do they kill us? I will tell him he needs to love his pigment, and he will say that it makes him a target. I would try to show him how to love his hair, and he will say that it feels like rope, tastes like heritage. When the teacher asks him what he wants to be when he grows up, he will say old. That he will look at a textbook and see our murders, wondering when he will get his plot. I will have to tell him what my mother told me. They will see your skin as a weapon, your voice ammunition. Cover up, but keep your head down. Hands up, don't make a sound. If you are too loud, they will kindly compare it to the sound of their bullet, asking if black people are so fast, why didn't you dodge it? Is this what they call family traditions? My culture was erased by privilege, and now it feels like the only thing I can pass down to my children is this noose, this gun, this knee, this barbed wire. Maybe one day he will stumble upon a story, a man with the name of Floyd, the marches that were held in his name, the air that his people breathed from him, when we got tired of being polite, tired of being peaceful, when a protest became a murder technique, angrier about a black man taking a knee against brutality than a white man taking a life. This is not just in Minneapolis, this is in our neighborhoods. One day I will look at my beautiful black boy and pray that he makes it home. That he doesn't run into the law. I have found that I have come to fear cops more than burglars. We don't want to call to have the fire extinguished in case they call us the arsonist. How can you question us when time and time again you have showed us that you will let us die? Ironic how a man who fought against gun violence died beneath a cop, suffocated on the irony when the cop proved to him that they can make any man disappear. That he would get his 15 minutes of fame from the grave. They thought that we wouldn't fight for him, that we would just not take back the air they stole from him. We won't let him disappear. We won't let this son, this father, this brother, this human being fade away. Did you know that one of the last things that George Floyd did was call out for his mother? Mama, he cried as if maybe the woman that gave him life could have saved him, or maybe he called out to her because he knew he was going to die. Like a child seeking out his mother on a dark night, wanting comfort, but only feeling the concrete floor. Mama, help me. I can't breathe. He's going to kill me. Thank you.
was really amazing and hit the sentiment of what's going on right now. As I talked to my 4 kids a few days ago and asked, and she explained the situation, they asked me, why couldn't they just arrest him? Why did they have to kill him, Dad? And they told me, no one deserves to be treated that way. My daughter couldn't understand why this happened. My 3 boys were sad and then angry. I took this opportunity to teach them the importance of treating all fairly and speaking for those who can't. When the next speaker heard that LULAC 2055 was organizing this event, he asked to be able to say a few words to our community. So please welcome Mayor Joe Gunter.
This is very difficult for every community across America. It's even more difficult as a mayor, as a former police officer, that we know now that this behavior, and we knew then, in 1969, this behavior is not acceptable. We have to treat people how we want to be treated. They have to stand up, and the officers in our bed need to talk about the bad officers. Maybe we need to change our procedure in hiring, in training, in retraining to make sure how we make it better. We need to do these things. And I know the chief's here, and she's heard this from me already, but we need to take a big address to this. We don't want to be Minnesota. We want to be Salinas, where the people make the difference in our community. And they do that. The people is what makes us. I've witnessed that, and every time they show that film, I keep thinking, somebody didn't do something. I'd have probably got arrested. That was all wrong, and everybody knows it. But then I follow more and more. We don't do that here. We don't want to do that here. We want to work with the community. So we look forward to going forward. We've seen the horror of what's occurred. We don't want to be the problem. We want to be the solution. So be safe tonight and pray for that man's family. This is about as horrible as it gets. He's 45 years old. He has 2 small children. Who is their father going to be? Hopefully, the community will help raise them up. This is extremely important. Thank you.
You can't discuss what's happening in the news without focusing on the conduct of the police. Minneapolis is not alone in these struggles of balancing protecting a community and enforcing the laws. Salinas has also faced these very issues, which not too long ago erupted in our own people taking to the streets as they had enough also. When our next speaker took the helm as chief of police, she was committed to open dialogue and listening to our community. And she is demonstrating that by being here today to talk to our community. We look forward to working towards common goals. Please welcome Chief Resse.
Good afternoon. I prepared some words, but first I want to make sure we have the record straight on what's been asked of us and what has changed. We have changed how we recruit. We have changed how we hire people. We have changed our standards and our screening process. And
We have accountability in Salinas.
Are we still a unity here? Thank you. And we've done that with all of you, the public, at our side. We've worked these new processes out together. And that's pretty much the theme of what I want to tell you. And I hope that you open your minds and your hearts for just a few minutes and let me be heard. Our deepest condolences go out to the family of Mr. Floyd, his community, and all of those grieving for the senseless and violent loss of a life at the hands of a police officer. The Salinas Police Department stands with the community in protest to the killing of Mr. Floyd of Minneapolis. As the Salinas, thank you. As the Salinas Police Chief, I stand with you, and I refuse to allow the actions of one police officer and the complicity of 3 others 2,000 miles away to derail the relationships we've built and the progress we have made together right here in our town. We cannot allow those officers' actions and their disregard for human life to take anything else away from us. Here in Salinas, we named our new police building the Police Service of Salinas because police service is the essence of what we do. It's our reason for being. For years, our profession has been referred to as the police force. And that's got to change. It's a thing of the past. We are guardians, and we are the police service. I ask that you stand with us as we build a future together, united, sculpting the relationship between our police, our community, and our future. We must take the next steps together. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
A legendary man whose grassroots work for decades has led to several historic positive changes in our communities. He led investigations and campaigns to stop police brutality on the Monterey Peninsula and in Salinas, California. He was appointed to the Access to Excellence Committee, designed to increase admissions of minority students to the California State University system. Mr. Mason was elected president of the Monterey County Peninsula chapter of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People for 3 consecutive terms. Mr. Mason chaired the committee that successfully created Monterey Peninsula College trustee districts to ensure voter equality and increase minority representation on the college's board of trustees. Mel Mason, co-founder of the Village Project, that provides services culturally tailored to African Americans and other populations historically underserved by mental health systems, an after-school academy for high-risk students. He was a former Black Panther and worked closely with Cesar Chavez in the UFW. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Mel Mason.
Oh, thank you. Wasn't expecting that long of an introduction. Generally, I just like someone to say, "Here is Mel." And since both the mayor and the chief took off their masks, whew, okay, maybe I can take off mine. Okay. Thank you. Excuse me. And thank you, Chris, and members of a great LULAC Council here in Salinas for inviting me to speak and say a few words here today. I really appreciate it. But as I try to do sometimes in bringing back old memories, start out talk with all power to the people. All power to the people. All power to the people. I want to set the tone right. So, and because we have to be reminded if not get to understand for the first time that true power is in the hands of the people. I was a member of the Black Panther Party back in the 1960s through the 70s, and it was police violence that helped give birth to the Black Panther Party. And that's when I began to develop some understanding of not only the role that police played in black communities, but the logical progression of the development and growth from the beginnings of its history in this country. Policing in this country has deep roots in slavery. Policing involved tracking down, capturing, and sometimes killing black people who were running to freedom. Policing, and when we saw the logical progression of it, we could kind of draw a link between what policing was like then and what policing was still like in black communities in this country. I've seen many instances where it seemed like policing was almost stuck in that past period of time. And we're not talking about individual officers. We're not talking about good officers versus bad officers. What we're talking about when we talk about policing is an institution, a system whose history in black communities has been such as an occupying force that did anything but serve and protect. So once again, we hear ourselves saying, enough is enough. Every generation of African ancestry people has said those words. Since the beginning, this country, which was founded on white supremacy, racism, and terror, has purposefully and aggressively diminished the value of black lives. Black people to this day remain unhealed from the intergenerational trauma carried down from the slave trade to today. And there have been some talks about looting. And obviously I don't think anybody out here, I certainly don't agree with looting and violence. I think that there's a good reason for that. One is that we don't want to see anybody hurt, we don't want to see property damage, but the big thing is that we don't want to have the narrative lost. We don't want to have our message lost. We got a message that we need people to hear. And I remember when Dr. King, who was always being pressed to denounce, radical blacks and to denounce, quote unquote, violence. And someone had asked him, so what do you think about all this looting and rioting that's going on? This was around the Watch, so-called riot, the Watch Rebellion. And he said, what you call riots is simply the voice of the people who haven't been heard. And so we have to remember that. But now I think we have a message that we can have somebody hear. We have a message that we can coherently deliver so that people can hear it. And one of the things is that we want an end to police brutality against black people right now. Right now. But when we talk about looting, what we have to understand is that black people have been looted for 400 years. The looting began when slavers showed up on the African continent and rounded up my ancestors and put them on ships and sailed them across what they called the Middle Passage, put them into slavery. Our lives were further diminished. And we were further looted. When our humanity was taken, we were no longer human beings, we were property and chattel. Not to mention the fact that we were declared at some point 3/5 of a human being. That was for voting purposes. Because the slave masters wanted to get more votes in the Electoral College. And so if they declared their slaves as being 3/5 of a human, so if you get a 3/5 person here and a 1/5 person here, then you have a whole person. You have a whole vote. But black people couldn't vote because black people were in slavery. They also were not able to be considered property because once you declare them at least partly human, then they can't be property. So then they couldn't be taxed. You see how that worked? See how that worked? But it was about us, though, our lives being totally diminished and reduced to zero. So we were looted.
But the other,
We were looted.
the other races,
People of Mexican descent were looted.
we're all the same.
What do you call this country stealing half of Mexico and making it its own if that's not looting? That's beyond grand larceny. Not to mention the dehumanizing of brown people in general by classifying them as illegal aliens. So we hear ourselves saying now, enough is enough.
Right.
And it really has to be enough. And if it is, then why are we continuing to say it? Because when Trayvon Martin was murdered, we said, enough is enough. When Michael Brown was murdered, we said, enough is enough. When Eric Garner was murdered, we said, enough is enough. When little Tamir Rice was gunned down and murdered by police, we were all yelling, enough is enough. When Ahmaud Arbery was murdered for jogging while black, and it took 74 days for charges to be brought against these two racists. And by the way, the race that people were calling for hate crime. And the attorneys for these two guys said, well, it's not a hate crime because they didn't have a Confederate flag flying from their pickup truck. So then we have Breonna Taylor and the murder that brings us here today, the murder of George Floyd, in which it took demonstrations in order to bring charges against the one who physically killed it, and there still hasn't been any charges brought against the ones who stood by and egged it on. And has anybody heard of third-degree murder? I haven't. Maybe I'm just dumb and ignorant. But I mean, he should have been charged with first-degree murder. But it seems like the system, which means the police chief and the DA, thought that if there was a charge of murder, that would satisfy black people. Please, let this really be enough is enough. Because the system of white supremacy, racism, and oppression will do what it's always done whenever we rebel. And that is to wait us out. They know that we're going to have this first big burst of energy and everything, and they actually could care less about the looting because they don't get looted. The people that run this system don't get looted. They loot us. And so we have to say enough is enough and really mean it. Because if we keep saying enough is enough, and then something else happens and we keep saying enough is enough, then enough is enough becomes a bluff. And we can't afford to be bluffing. So we have to build a movement. That's the next step. And I'll hurry up and try to take my seat. I don't want to go over my time.
Go.
But what we're doing here today is the beginning. The gatherings like this and the ones that have been happening elsewhere can serve as the beginning of movement. But this is not a movement. Not yet. A movement requires organizing, mobilizing, momentum, energy, and thought. A movement is to be sustained for years if need be. We need a movement to call out all systems of injustice and facilitate actions to radically change those systems where disparities are profound, which includes social and other human services that many black people are not often privy to. These disparities play a role in police being in our communities in outlandish numbers. And I don't want to leave out the systems that created mass over-incarceration of black and brown people and other people of color and turning the prison system into an extension of slavery and slave plantations. So our work is cut out for us. This is a national problem, so it needs a national solution. So what are the next steps, as far as I'm concerned? One is to organize locally. I think it was mentioned that we had an organization here once called the Civil Rights Coalition in Monterey County. It brought together all of the civil rights organizations in Monterey County together, and we stomped in this place. And we stomped and we took care of business in this place. So you have CRC as a model. Then it should be about organizing on the state level. And finally, there should be a national gathering of all activists and groups to come up with common platforms and programs and hit these systems like they've never been hit before. And I'll leave you with this last prophetic quote from one of my heroes, Malcolm X, who after giving a speech once, had a white man come up to him all upset and ask Malcolm, "Why do you always have a chip on your shoulder?" To which Malcolm X replied, "That's not a chip on my shoulder, that's your foot on my neck." Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. Please join me in welcoming a resident of Salinas, a grad student studying counseling and psychology at USF, a volunteer in our community, a mother whose action with the high school district will lead to positive change for minorities here in Salinas. Please welcome Asia Gilroy. Asia Gilroy.
Good afternoon. I'm gonna leave the mask on. Fashion statement. Thank you, Mr. Barrera, Mr. Sandoval, for the work that you do in the community for free. I want to put that on there. You always say that. Thank you for inviting me. And I'll be honest, I was hesitant to come out here today. Because like many black people, frankly, we're done talking. We done talking. We done talked enough. And listening and watching the news reporters retell and re-examine and comment on how another life can be taken from us in broad daylight, it is sickening. It's repulsive, and it should fill all of us with rage. As we watch another Black American's power taken, we can all begin to feel quite powerless. And I want to quote from this book that I have up here, Black Rage. And this was written in 1968. And even though it's 2020, it speaks very true to what we're living through today. It says, but the overriding experience of the Black American has been grief and sorrow, and no man can change that fact. His grief has been realistic and appropriate. What people have so earned a period of mourning. We want to emphasize yet again the depth of grief for slain sons and ravished daughters. How deep and lingering it is. In the depth of sorrow, we can then discover, or we can then consider what can be made of this emotion. As grief lifts and the sufferer moves towards health, the hatred he had turned on himself is redirected towards his tormentors. And the fury of his attack on the one who caused him the pain is in direct proportion to the depth of his grief. When the mourner lashes out in anger, it is a relief to those who love him, for they know he has now returned to health. We are done talking. It's time for things to obviously change. And if that means flames, if that means turning cities upside down, if that means whatever we're seeing on the news, then so be it. That is an expression of grief and of rage. Observe the amount of rage. I ain't got much time. Observe that the amount of rage the oppressed turns on his tormentor is a direct function of the depth of his grief, and consider the intensity of the black man's grief. Become for a moment a black citizen in Birmingham, Alabama, and try to understand his grief and dismay when innocent children are slain while they worship for no other reason than being black. That was 1960. Imagine how an impoverished mother feels when she watches the light of creativity snuffed out in her children by schools which dull the minds of environs which rot the soul. For a moment, make yourself the black father whose son went innocently to war and was slain. For whom and for what? For a moment, be any black person anywhere and you feel the waves of hopelessness that engulf black men and women. When Martin Luther King was murdered, when Malcolm X was murdered, all black people understand the tide of anarchy that followed his death. It is the transformation of this quantum of grief into aggression which we now speak. I want to just tell you, this collective grief, every mother out here who has seen a black man die on national television or on social media on repeat, this is grief. This is grief. This is grief gathered from the African ancestors who saw their kin sold off shores. This is grief for those who jumped off the boat, died in squalor, and were killed in resistance. This is grief for the millions that built this America from the ground up to make it as great as it is. This is grief. This is grief from raped and sacrificed wombs, birthing infinite sons and daughters to be snatched from bosoms. This is grief. This is grief. Look, Pops, you need to calm down, okay? Just calm down for a moment. I'm almost finished. This is grief from enriching its soils with sweat, with tears, with the spiritual songs that we sang. That's grief that made America great. Not being able to vote, grief from it being illegal to read, grief from Jim Crow, quantum grief from not being able to go to the schools you want to go to, grief from not being able to ride in a train car or on the bus in the seat you desire, grief, collective grief to see your people lynched, to see your people hosed down, to see your people sicked with dogs, grief to see your leaders assassinated. And God damn it, I'm tired of grieving. America should be tired of grieving. We're grieving George. We're grieving Ahmaud. We're grieving Brianna. We're grieving Tamir. We're grieving Philando. We're grieving Freddie. We're grieving Oscar. We're grieving Sean. We're grieving Trayvon. We're grieving Sandra. We're grieving Catherine. We're grieving Lennon. We are tired of naming names. There are too many names to recount. There are too many murders, too many names to honor, too few killers being held accountable, too many families left without words, too few police that get what they deserve. A t-shirt, a memorial, a speech, a protest. These mothers deserve justice. They deserve their sons and their daughters to not be killed in front of us, loop after loop after loop after loop. As Killer Mike says, this is murder porn for all of America to see. We are the hunted. We are the prey of the animals that believe they are supreme. So we can't breathe. We're strangled spiritually. We're choked economically. Politically, we have no oxygen. This democracy demonizes us for what and for why? How many times? How many names? How many lives? So much rage. How many times? How many lives? Too many names. How many times? Too many names. Too many lives. Black rage. Rest in peace, George, and all of those that have been sacrificed before you. You will not be forgotten.
Thank you, Asia. You've already been introduced in a manner to this mother. She instilled in her daughters the power of words to make beauty out of their pain. She is the mother of Kenya Burton, who she instilled in her daughter to just make it home. She grew up on the east side and continues to raise her children there. And ironically, she went to college in Minneapolis, so the recent events that occurred have deeply impacted her since she called that place home. And she continues to raise strong biracial Blaxican women. Please welcome Kenya's mom, Kathy Gomez.
Well, I'm going to be bold and I'm going to take off the mask because I can't breathe. You get me? Okay, I just want to call out those of you that are shouting, what about us? What about brown people? You cannot inexplicably define our history
without it not being intertwined. What happens to black people happens to brown people. So don't get it wrong. When they're up here saying black lives matter, it's brown lives matters too. They just don't have it on there, but it's implicit. It's there. It's a given. So don't think their pain up here is just for them. It is for brown people too, who struggle with the same racism, the same systematic oppression. So I don't want to hear what about brown people. When they're up here, it's us. It's this skin, okay? It's shades of brown. Thank you. And I also want to call out that today is the 100th anniversary of the massacre in Tola, where we lost over 1,000 black people. I want you all to go home and Google that and know your history, the history they forget to tell you. I grew up, I'm going to preface, Andrew, I'm going over my time. I grew up on the east side of Salinas. My life was limited to a 4-mile radius. When I graduated from Alisa High School, I left to college in Minnesota. I went to school in the Twin Cities, and Minneapolis was my stomping ground. It was there that I learned the true face of racism laced with Minnesota liberal niceties. I went from one of many to the only one. What happened to George Floyd is nothing new. 25 years ago as a college student, we were still protesting in Minneapolis about police brutality, truly grassroots. We didn't have social media or cell phones back then, so it was all word of mouth and flyers handed out and posted on windows to get the community organized. It pains me that more than 25 years later, Minneapolis and this country are no better off. That the sit-in and the marches we led had little effect on the systematic oppression of people of color and the overly aggressive policing of minority communities. Fast forward years and different scenery, but the images are all the same. People of color needlessly shot and killed for little to no cause. Some for doing things that others take for granted. Jogging, sleeping, history continues to repeat itself. I have biracial children, raising 3 black and Mexican daughters in the east side of Salinas. I have always affirmed the beauty and strength of both cultures, as well as the real American history that goes along with the color of their skin. From Zoot Suit riots to lynching, slavery, Jim Crow laws, segregation, Texas Rangers, Emmett Till. Oh, Emmett, a 14-year-old African-American boy who was lynched in Mississippi in 1955 after being accused of offending, yes, offending, a white woman. The white woman, Carolyn Bryant, came forward decades later, admitting she fabricated part of the story. Does this not sound familiar? Fast forward 65 years and we see a video footage of Amy Cooper in Central Park, a white woman who was offended when a black man asked her to put a leash on her dog according to park rules placed to protect birds. He did not touch her, he did not yell at her, he offended her by merely being a black man asking her to follow the rules. And what did Amy Cooper do? She called the cops and lied that he was an African-American man trying to kill her. She even told Chris Cooper, before she called the cops on him, that she was going to tell him that it was a black man trying to kill her and her dog. Just for good measure, she added the dog, because we all know how people love dogs, right? Her story was not true, but Amy, like the majority of people that have been indoctrinated by the bias and covert racism that permeates, that permeates this country, knew that they would come to her aid because of her privilege. Chris Cooper, a black man, an avid bird watcher, could have been killed for no more than offending a white woman. And Amy would have been just as guilty of pulling that trigger. Does this story sound familiar? Paralyzed the tragic death of a 14-year-old boy named Emmett, who was mutilated, castrated, shot in the head, and thrown in the river because a white woman was offended and lied. And as we try to move past Aubrey being gunned down for running, and Amy's irresolute charge call to the police confirming how easy it is to use a system in place to perpetrate the injustice on people of color, along comes the footage of George Floyd dying underneath the weight of the policeman's knee. And we all died slowly that day while we watched how callously they took his life away from him, at first covering up his murder, saying he resisted arrest, which was later debunked. And there was the match that blew the powder keg that had been 400 years in the making. And they wonder why we can't breathe. Well, some Americans tell their children about taxes and credit scores. People of color teach their children to learn how to navigate a system that was created systematically to oppress them. That to some, your skin is seen as a threat and your voice, though sweet like honey, is seen as hostile. We teach them to learn when you are stopped by the police, put your hands on the steering wheel. Don't make any sudden movements. Don't react, even when they are blatantly abusing your civil liberties. Because when it comes to your version versus theirs, you will never win. Not even if there are 7 different angles being filmed. There will be violence. There will always be the justification that whatever level of violence and aggression was warranted by the innate fact that they somehow felt their life threatened by the words coming out of your mouth. Words spilling out of the black mouths can sometimes equal black lies spilling out on concrete. Do you know, as a woman of color raising black children, a car accident would be more welcome than being harassed by law enforcement? I'll let that sink in. A car accident, I'd rather that happen to my children than them be harassed by law enforcement. In a car accident, it doesn't occur because of the color of your skin. But racial profiling by law enforcement, it's all about the color of your skin. A car accident doesn't leave you demoralized, but being detained by the police for no reason does. Not being allowed to leave, being fearful of arrest, or worse, leaves you feeling violated or dead. It leaves you feeling powerless, less than a second-class citizen. And the number of citizens that just stand around and watch these continual cases of police brutality unfold in front of them makes me recall the story of Cain and Abel in the Bible. Cain kills his brother Abel, and when God hears Abel's blood calling to him, he asks Cain, "Where is your brother?" And he responds to God, "I am not my brother's keeper." We need to stop being Cains. We, including the law enforcement, need to be our brother's keeper. We as a community cannot expect an oppressive system to change its status quo, to treat people of color with respect and dignity because it's the right thing to do. We must demand that. We must mobilize. We as a community must come forward and as a collective and say enough is enough. We must urge our city leaders to not invest in more policing as the solution. The solution is investing in the people they serve and protect. Invest in our parks, in our recreations, our libraries. Invest in creative outlets for our youth. Push for equal education in our school and improved access for minorities to AP classes. Do not allow them to use police as a band-aid. Fix the underlying conditions so we can make it easier for police to do their jobs by investing back in the people they're supposed to protect. And most of all, vote. Our forefathers fought for the right for us to cast our vote, and we take that right for granted. We have the monumental opportunity to make a difference in our local communities by showing up at the polls. People of color vote at a substantially lower rate than whites. History was designed to make you feel apathetic, like you can't instill change, but that is a lie. If you are angry about the leadership in place, if you are unhappy and don't feel the current leadership on school boards, city council, board of supervisors have your best interests in place, then get out there and vote them out of office. And if not, sit back, grab your popcorn, and watch this country ignite and let history repeat itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Our next speaker has a master's in education and is currently serving as an educational specialist for the Salinas Union High School District. She is an entrepreneur and 2019 Salinas Valley Hall of Fame inductee. She is a mother of 4. Please welcome Tamisha Smith.
Good afternoon, thank you for being here. I'm going to break it down black and white for you. I have one of my daughters here because the basis of if you don't get anything else out of what I say, all lives cannot matter until Black lives matter. That is the bottom line. Because Black falls under all. Okay? I'm going to break it down in black and white. Bear with me because those who have been slaughtered have names. I can walk alone. Clifford Grover, RIP to all of these people that I will be saying. I can plan a party, Claude Reese. I can ask the police a question, Randy Evans. I can cash a check, Yvonne Smallwood. I can take out my wallet, Amadou Diallo. I can hold a hairbrush, Sean Bell. I can party on New Year's, Oscar Grant. I can walk home, Trayvon Martin. I can play loud music, Jordan Davis. I can ask for help, Jonathan Farrell. I can sleep, Ayanna Jones. I can breathe, Eric Garner. I can shop at Walmart, John Crawford. I can walk from the store, Mike Brown. I can play cops and robbers, Tamir Rice. I can run, Walter Scott. I can live, Freddie Gray. I can go to church, Charleston 9. I can get a traffic ticket, Sandra Bland. I can have car problems, Corey Jones. I can sell CDs, Alton Sterling. I can lawfully carry a weapon, Philando Castillo. I can stand next to my car, Terrence Crutcher. I can read a book, Keith Scott. I can leave a party, Jordan Edwards. I can have a cell phone, Stephen Clark. I can relax in my own home, Botham Sean. I can look out the window, Atiana Jefferson. I can go jogging, Ahmaud Arbery. I won't be murdered, George Floyd. What I'm going to tell you is this is a shift in collective consciousness of the universe. This time had to happen. Light workers, this is our time. This is the time to rise up in love and spread light through whichever foundation of belief system you have. There's no time to be separated by religion. This is time to come together for humanity. We must drive out systems. And when I say systems, we're not just talking about the police. We are talking about the levels of money. We're talking about programs. You're hearing this over and over again. My sister Asia already talked about that. Systems, it does not only have to deal with police brutality, but let's start there. This is a battle for humanity. And if you are on the side of humanity and the fair treatment of people in general, you must awaken. I must say this again. And you guys who are here, you're awake, but it's your family members. It's your friends. It's the people that you work with. If you are for people, the fair treatment of people in general, you must awaken to the reality that all lives cannot matter until the Black life matters. Black life is placed in the category of all. So when you fight us, when you come back to us with all lives matter, we know that. We're educated. We know that. You know why? Because we know as a people that we are a part of all. I don't know what the disconnect is, but this is a time where we have to continue to say that. Don't come back to us and say that all lives matter. We know that. There are many arms that can flow from the heart of this battle, and we are in a battle. Boots on the ground, that's you. You guys who are here to listen and to process and then act. There are other arms that can create programs. Mr. Mason has already created programs. He's talked about those programs, but it's now time to extend those programs. Arms that can fund programs. I must say that I'm blessed to live in this community, and it brings me joy to be able to teach on the East Side. And it's such a joy to teach all students from all backgrounds. And when I talk about students, I'm talking about the youth, because that's where we need to start. Because people are set in their ways. I'm set in my ways, you're set in your ways, but it's time to wake up. This is where it starts. As a mother of 4 daughters, it's my job to help raise up a generation. So when I was young, in our community, if I was doing something bad, my neighbor could come and check me. It's time to check your neighbor. It's time to raise up a generation. As a mother of 4 daughters, it's my job to help raise up a generation that is fueled with facts and some of the oppressive policies that cause divide and civil unrest. We must educate, we must create programs, we must fund those activities that enrich their experience with knowledge of legislation. Knowledge of legislation, meaning that we need to know it because we need to teach it. We need to teach facts. And it directly affects them. We must find ways to aggressively, yet peacefully, create change. The first checkpoint is our own heart and our willingness to take our rightful duty to teach the younger generation how not to continue this oppressive state of affairs. One thing I want to leave with you. I know that we love to say, I can't breathe, because that's what our slain brothers have said. But I charge you and I charge your heart and I ask you to think about this. Your words manifest your reality. If we continue to say, I can't breathe as a collective consciousness, we are manifesting that into our reality. Let me tell you something. We can breathe. We will breathe. We are breathing. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, all the names that I named before, and the countless many other lives that we don't even know about because it wasn't on tape. We will continue to speak your names and fight for justice with action for change. All lives can't matter until the Black life matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanisha. We have one more mother speak. Please join me in welcoming January Brown.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to have words today. I didn't write anything down because I am coming to you from a place of being a mother, a Black mother, a proud Black mother. I want to start by saying congratulations to the class of 2020. And I'm saying congratulations. And while me and my husband should be happy right now because we have a 2020 graduate, while we should be able to sit and pick out decorations for his dorm room, we have to sit and constantly have the speech with them. All of my children, we have to have the speech and let them know that even though they are following the rules, they could still get gunned down in the street with no consequence, like George Floyd. The time is now to take a stand. My children, my family are not target practice for you. We are proud Black people. We volunteer in our community. I want all of you to know right now, if you have ever went to coffee with your Black friends and loved ones, if you've played on the same court as your Black friends and loved ones, if you've shared a meal with your Black friends and loved ones, this is not just a Black problem, it's a we problem. All of us need to take a stand and show some type of accountability and actually stand for what is right. While you're drinking your lattes and having drinks and cheersing, look at these faces right here that they are using as target practice and always having some type of racial profiling against our children. The last time I took a stand, when I felt like there was some racial injustice at my children's school, guess what they called me? Angry black mom. Angry black mom because I care about my children. I have made myself sick. Me and my husband have been walking around our house shedding real live tears, making ourselves sick over this. The time is now. It is up to us to stand and make a change in the world and in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. A Salinas Union High School trustee, one of the youngest elected officials in Monterey County, and an advocate in challenging structural racism. Please welcome Anthony Rocha.
Thank you all so much for being here, especially during this turbulent time. Not only are we facing a global pandemic, but we're confronted with the plague of institutional racism and police brutality. The murder of George Floyd was a stark reality check that racism still exists in our country. Far too often, black parents have to tell their children that they may be stopped, arrested, or in some instances even killed, simply because of the color of their skin. As was mentioned before, enough is enough. As a school board member, I can't even begin to tell you how proud I am to see so many young faces here today. Because we are going to be the generation that is going to bring an end to this disgusting institutional racism which has plagued our country for 400 years. It has been 56 years since the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and 155 years since the abolishment of slavery. And not much has changed, but too much has changed to go back. So as we're all here today, let's remember that protests are just the beginning of a movement. And it is going to take a collective effort of people coming together at all levels of government to challenge structural racism, to challenge police brutality, because as was mentioned before, police brutality is one symptom of a much larger problem that we have to begin to address. So thank you for being here today, and as an elected official, I stand with you, and countless other elected officials here stand with you as well. The fight continues, la lucha sigue. Thank you.
Our next speakers have been working nonstop during this COVID pandemic, and they serve not just this area, but the county as a whole. It's my pleasure to introduce Chair of the Monterey County Supervisor, Supervisor Chris Lopez, and Supervisor Alejo.
Good evening. I'm going to tell you about my Mimi. My sister, she lives in Texas, in a town called McKinney. Will you raise your hand if you've heard about the town called McKinney? Most of us have. And it's because a 12-year-old girl was body slammed outside of a pool for going swimming by a police officer. When she moved there, my whole family asked her to step back and reconsider because she married somebody whose skin is black, and we were worried for her and her children being in that community. Why did we have to have that conversation? Well, let me tell you about a harder conversation. This weekend, she had to pull aside her 10-year-old son and have a talk with him about all the names on a t-shirt that he saw in front of him. She wrote them down and he went home and he Googled them. He started crying. Said, "Mom, can we talk? Why would God make me this way if people would hate me for nothing else than the color of my skin, Mom? Why?" Too many children lost their innocence this weekend and over the last few weeks. Ahmaud Arbery, yes. Emmett Till, yes. George Steiny Jr. Our government killed George Steiny Jr., a 14-year-old boy with the electric chair. That is our history as a nation. But it's up to us to change it. And let me tell you what gave me hope. My Mimi. Mimi's 3 years old. She's my niece, and she's Blaxican. She stood up at a protest in Dallas and raised her sign higher than anybody else on the shoulders of her father. And it was boiled down to one word, and that's all I need. Enough. Enough. We're done with this. As a nation, as a community, we're done. We're done laying our people in the ground. We're done dividing ourselves, because together we are stronger, and that's what people fear. They fear strength. But that's what we are. We are strong as a community and as a nation. And I look at my Mimi, 3 years old, and that will be a picture that lives on in her life forever. An entire generation now has lost that innocence. But there will be other generations, and we have the power today. When I think of enough, what rings out in my mind is I'm done. I'm not looking for a better tomorrow. I'm looking for a better today. No more waiting. No more standing on the sidelines saying soon and oh, we'll make some changes. Now. Now. For them and for every one of us. That's why I'm here today. To stand with you and tell you that George Floyd was murdered. Black Lives Matter. And we are strong and we are proud of who we are. And we're all bound to one another. And that's what makes us strong. We will know peace because we will know justice. I stand by those words and I stand with you today proud of who we are as a community. And with that, I want to turn it over to a man who's led a lot of change in our community. A man who brought driver's license to people without paperwork. A man who stood for us from day one. I want to introduce you to my compa, Luis Alejo.
Everybody, because we are in Salinas, and because George Floyd is with us. When I call out George Floyd, if we can lift our fists in the air and say presente, and then when we call, what do we want? If we can say justice, George Floyd! Presente! George Floyd! Presente! George Floyd! Presente! What do we want? Justice! What do we want? Justice! What do we want? Justice! Thank you. I want to thank everyone. These many faces who came here to Salinas, and all those who protested in Monterey and Seaside on Saturday, who those protested in South Salinas yesterday, and those who will continue to voice and protest and speak out, because we all know that we all have a voice. We could all stand together. We could all unite and create solidarity together, but when we're silent, we're part of the problem, not part of the solution. As Dr. King said, in the end, we will not remember the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. So each of us have a responsibility. Each of us have an obligation in these moments of crisis, and these moments when our young children are looking at us to say, what are you going to do about what I just watched happen in Minnesota? Each one of us has an obligation to stand up and to fight and to organize and to demand the change that we need. I'm a Latino elected official that represents most of the city limits of Salinas, but I come out here today because I too am sick and tired of being sick and tired. Those are the words of Fannie Lou Hamer many years ago, but they echo true today, because it's not the first time this has happened. Since the inception of this country, there's been injustice against black men and black women time and time again, and it continues to this day. So I'm going to stand with you, create solidarity with my African American brothers and sisters, but we should all stand together here in Monterey County. And so thank you for coming out today. It was not just George Floyd, as has been mentioned repeatedly. When you see the videotape of Philando Castile in his car and his girlfriend is recording live on Facebook, the pullover, the fact that he followed every instruction of that officer up until he was asked to take out his license and registration, and then gunned down live on social media. It was Breonna Taylor who was killed when they entered without a warrant and entered into the wrong house and killed an innocent woman. It was Eric Garner who was in front of a store and was alleged to sell cigarettes, and then they choked the life out of him. And it was just a month ago, a 14-year-old boy who was beaten time and time again by an adult police officer, unjustifiably, criminally. And so it hurts me, like Andrew Sandoval, when I saw that video, I too was in pain, I was in hurt, I was angry. my heart was devastated, as it is today, because it happened too often, too many times in this country. When I saw the tape of George Floyd, when you see that knee on his neck, and today there was an independent audit, and the science says that the other two officers who also had their weight on him were complicit in that murder because they choked the life out of him. They didn't allow the blood to circulate in his body while the other officer stood by and did nothing. That is what we cannot do. We cannot no longer stand by and do nothing after we've seen so much injustice. And that is why we announced it today that next week, our Board of Supervisors, your county government, will take up a resolution to also officially condemn the actions of all 4 officers and to ask that criminal charges be brought up against all 4. All 4 deserve to go to jail for that injustice, that egregious action, that criminal act that they did. I'm tired of that. But more than that, at every level of government, our city councils, our county supervisors, our state legislators, our Congress, we all have a responsibility too. Not just to say and deplore these actions by these officers. It's important that we also make decisions that advance the community. When we're talking about fighting for our schools and educational justice, we got to be supporting that too. Supporting our libraries, our social programs, our homeless residents. Those all things matter more importantly. So I ask that we follow through on that. I do commend those law enforcement leaders who took a knee, such as Santa Cruz Police Chief. I thank those police officers who attended the protest in Watsonville, our district attorney in Monterey. We need many more. That's good today, but more importantly, we need the policies that address the institutional racism, department by department, city by city, county by county. So I ask that we continue this. We have a lot more work to do, but we have to do it knowing, like our young people, we had 300 young people who marched today and spoke out and demanded change in this country. That's promising because they are the future. And if they're standing up, I hope they continue to stand up for the rest of their lives, demanding and creating a better future all across this nation. With that, everybody, thank you very much. What do we want? What do we want? What do we want? George Floyd! George Floyd! George Floyd! Thank you. Muchas gracias, everybody. Luis Alejo.
Enough is enough. I'd like to thank you guys for being here, and I'd like to introduce our next speaker, a very hardworking man advocating for the entire community all across Monterey County, a personal friend of mine. I'd like you to welcome one of the principal organizers of this event here. Please welcome Salinas LULAC 2055 President Chris Barrera.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us in this very important moment in our community and nation. We are at a crossroads as we men start the healing process and make change with this national epidemic of police brutality. Enough is enough, and I'm sick of it. And it's all up to us to get involved. It's just not LULAC 2055, it's all of us. It's NAACP, it's every single one of you that's here today. We at LULAC 2055 denounce all racism and all police brutality. There is no place in our community for such behavior against black and brown individuals. Our hearts and prayers go out to the George Floyd family and all the families who have been affected by such tragedies. This is what can happen when you have a few bad apples. They can spoil a whole police department. Those bad officers have turned this nation upside down. And now it's time to pick up the pieces and make change for the better, beginning with the conviction of all 4 officers. We in Salinas, we are blessed to have a great police chief in Chief Adel Frese, who is making great strides within our Salinas Police Department in the last few years. But there is always room for improvement, and that is what we are striving for each and every day. We must hold our elected officials city leaders, police department accountable for their actions and behavior when something does occur. And please know, issues will come up and we will deal with them. We do not live in a perfect world, but communication is key. We must strive to invest in our community and children and not just concentrate on incarcerating them and locking them up. We must come together as a community and a nation to rise above all this hatred and be better than that. Together we can make change. It is necessary that we not only peacefully protest, but protest at the ballot box and fill out your Census 2020 form. Our community is depending on you. Here's a plan we can all do better together. Make sure you register and vote. Every single one of you. Fill out your Census 2020 form. You see something, you say something. You file a report or a complaint when you see something wrong. If you aren't happy with your city representation, run for office. Get involved and have a voice. City budget. We need to address this matter so our children have services and after-school programs. We need to be proactive. We at LULAC 2055 are here to support each and every one of you, and you can call us anytime and we will show up. We love our great community of Salinas and Monterey County, and we love each and every one of you. It is time for all of us to be part of the solution and get involved. Thank you very much, and Black Lives Matter.
Please welcome Patty Padilla-Salzberg, trustee for the Salinas Union High School District and our member of our Salinas LULAC 2055, as she reads the name of those that have fallen, lest thee be forgotten.
Buenas tardes a todos. Muchas gracias por estar aquí con ustedes. Es un honor estar aquí con ustedes. And I also want to say that all lives matter. I am a proud grandmother of 5 beautiful Blaxicans, and they have had such a tough life, and that is unacceptable. And so I am so happy to be here with all of you today. And I bring my 2 full Mexican grandkids because we want justice. So when I say justice, you say now. Justice! Now! Justice! Now! Justice! Now! Justice! Now! Justice! Now! Just needed to wake you guys up so you guys can hear. I had the honor of mentioning the names of the Latino people that have been shot by the police here in the city of Salinas. And all of you here today heard the same thing I heard, that the mayor and the chief said that there has been some changes. So we are hoping that from today forward, we will no longer have to witness anybody being killed for no reason in the city of Salinas. With that being said, please listen to the following names. For the year 2014, Angel Reese, Osman Hernandez, Carlos Mejia Gomez, Jaime Garcia. The year 2015, Jose Velasco. The year 2017, Marlon Joel Roda Sanchez. The year 2019, Brenda Mendoza. With that being said, all of you, we have to stick together because we are all here because we all agree that enough, we are done. We are done having to deal with the death for no reason. So I stand here before you in hopes that we can hold the city of Salinas accountable, that we will not have to be here another day voicing our opinions because another person was killed for no reason. So again, when I say what do we want, you say justice. What do we want? Justice! 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 Thank you all.
Please join me in welcoming an activist, a community leader, and a volunteer in our community while he's visiting, Antoine Wallace.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Before I say anything, I want to give an honor to God, who is the head of my life and the reason why I am here, and the power under my wings and my feet, who wakes me up every morning, who gets me home safe through every encounter I have with anyone, let alone police. So first and foremost, I want to give an honor to God. I'm gonna look in the direction of these young black children while I read these names. I want to let you guys know that I was around your age when the first of many unarmed black people were killed that I can remember in my lifetime. I'm 30 years old. His name was Amadou Diallo, and he was shot in New York City for reaching for his wallet when prompted for identification. An African immigrant in our country, the country that is supposed to be liberty and justice for all, he died for reaching for his wallet. And it's one of the reasons I'm so hesitant to reach for mine whenever I'm pulled over. So I look to you because, like they said, so many innocence was stolen from young children. And I'm looking at you to let you know that I won't let that happen to you. So while I read, I will be looking directly at you. And the things that I do in every community that I visit is for you. And to let you know that the older generation, while we have been fed up and we're tired and we've worked, we do it all for you, because you will carry on our legacy and you will be the prophecy fulfilled. You will lead us out of this. Trayvon Martin, Amadou Diallo, Breonna Taylor, Ezell Ford, Sean Bell, Sandra Bland, Tamir Rice, Blake King, George Floyd, Renisha McBride, Jordan Davis, Katherine Johnston, Mike Brown, Oscar Grant, Charles Vaughn, John Crawford, Freddie Gray, Philando Castile, Alton Sterling, Kristen Cooper. There are so many names that cannot fit on this canvas. There are so many more names that will not be on another canvas. There are so many hashtags. There's so much peace and so much forgiving that we can do. You've had many leaders up here ask you to hold your elected officials accountable. It doesn't stop at the ballot. Those people that you put in power, you are their constituents. They answer to you. So after you put them in power, you hold them accountable to the power that you gave them. You, your voice, your skin, your eyes, your hair. First of all, I love your hair. Don't ever let anyone say anything about your hair. You too. Those locks in your hair, that's your power. And I call them locks because there is nothing dreadful about your hair. So back to my point about holding the people accountable after you vote, after you cast your ballot and you put them in office and you celebrate with them, and there's parades and there's pay raises and corner offices, you hold them accountable to make change in your community. So we no longer have to fear to reach for our wallets for a routine traffic stop. And I look at you, I don't know you, but I love you. These people around here, they love you. That's all. Thank you.
enough is enough. We have a lot of work ahead of us. We all do. And we've been through it before, and we may be discouraged at times, but I want to tell you, all things are possible with God. Okay? All things are possible with God. And as we come to a conclusion of our speakers, and after our speakers come, our pastors come, we're going to invite you to demonstrate along the streets, and we'd like you to, make your voice heard. So at this time, we invite Pastor Jack Alicea to speak. Joining him is Pastor Matt Gersund, Jeremy Rangel, Matt Silvestri, Ramiro Lugo, Dave Dove, Pastor Raul Lamali, Bishop Andrew Lopez.
We're all gathered here for the same purpose today, because we have hope. Hope that things will change. Things will change in our city, our county, our nation. And when I look at this crowd, I see hope. These pastors that are standing here with me, we believe that black lives do matter. And we do believe that with God helping us, He's not going to do it for us, but He's going to help us. And we will see change. When I seen Anthony standing up here, and I seen the first speaker, I thought to myself, Anthony's not going to have as many white hairs. And making a speech that he's had to make for many years, because things change. Things change through you, through me, and together we can. I'm going to ask you to please kneel in solidarity today with our brothers and sisters, and do it humbly before God in a moment of silence. The scripture says in Micah chapter 6, "O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justice, to love kindness, and walk humbly before your God." Let's pray. Lord, in these days, many are reliving personal pain, and they have felt the fear and the anger as they see the discrimination rise up again and again. As we've seen the horrible murder of Mr. George Floyd before our very eyes, we ask you to bring healing. Healing to our hearts, healing to our land. Our nation is hurting. Please sweep through this nation and heal this land. Restore our strength, renew our minds, heal our hearts. In Jesus' name, amen.
So we want to thank all of you for coming. Okay, Black Lives Matter. We need to be the change. We need to get together, not just today on this issue, but on every issue. We need to hold our elected officials accountable, but we need to be there to speak and to show up. So thank you for being here, and we encourage you to speak your voice and to join us along the street. Thank you very much.
is us too.
Alright, man, give some honks. Black Lives Matter, man. Very fun. They got a second wave back there.
Say it again! George Floyd!
Great job, Wes. Right on, thanks.
George Floyd! What's his name? 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 George Floyd! George Floyd! George Floyd! What's his name? 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 Don't shoot! Hands up! Don't shoot! Hands up! Don't shoot! Hands up! Don't shoot! Hands up! Don't shoot!
Yeah, I know. 3 sets.
Black lives matter! 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 united, we'll never be divided. power like the people, 'cause the power of the people don't stop. Say what? Ain't no power like the power